Welcome to this confessional story of Nikola Tesla, the genius who turned imagination into reality, who lived not for wealth or fame, but for invention to serve humanity, leaving behind a legacy that still powers our modern lives. Today, we're listening to his life story from his own perspective. If these are the kinds of explorations that call to your soul, please consider subscribing to this channel. We are dedicated to diving deep into the greatest minds of human history. Now, without any further delay, let's listen to Nikola Tesla's life and wisdom from his perspective. The first memory I have is not of a sight or a touch, but of resonance. A cat arching its back against my small hand in the twilight room of my earliest years, and the sudden, startling crackle of miniature lightning leaping from fur to fingertip. A sudden gasp, not of fear, but of profound recognition. This spark, it was not strange. It was kin, a secret language whispered directly into my marrow, promising a universe woven not of dead matter, but of vibrant, singing force. My childhood landscape was one of stark mountains and sudden storms, a place where the air itself felt charged, alive. I learned the contours of solitude early, finding companions not in boisterous games, but in the intricate dance of raindrops on window panes, tracing ephemeral circuits. In the wind's mournful song through the pines, a natural alternating current. My mind, even then, was a crucible. Thoughts arrived not as orderly sentences, but as blinding flashes of light. Whole machines, landscapes of pure geometry, symphonies of unseen forces, erupting fully formed behind my eyes. They burned with such intensity, I feared my skull would crack. To translate these visions, it was like trying to capture starlight in a thimble. The world moved with such agonizing slowness. Then came the crushing weight of shadow. The brightest light casts the deepest dark. When the vibrant echo of my brother's laughter was silenced, extinguished, the universe didn't just lose a sound, it lost a fundamental frequency. The resonant harmony shattered. I stood at the precipice of that loss, gazing into a void that echoed back not silence, but a terrible, accusing question. Why him? Why not the one whose mind blazed with inconvenient light? Guilt became a lodestone in my chest, heavy and cold. It taught me the terrible intimacy of absence, a lesson that would forever alter my relationship with presence. My beloved mother, her own light dimmed by grief, became a silent monument to endurance. In her worn hands and quiet sorrow, I saw the cost of connection, the vulnerability of loving something the world could so easily steal. My flight from that mountain cradle was not merely ambition, it was a terrified recoil from the unbearable fragility of the heart. How could I anchor myself to anything, anyone, when the ground itself felt like shifting sand? The city awaited, a monstrous, glittering constellation of perpendicular dreams. Its streets were canyons echoing with the clatter of ambition, a discordant symphony to my attuned senses. I moved through its throngs like a ghost, feeling the brush of sleeves not as touch, but as jarring static discharges, the collective hum of 1,000 minds, a physical pressure against my temples. My mind was a forge where visions were hammered into blueprints, but the world demanded coin, not constellations. The man who saw numbers as colors, who tasted geometries, who conversed with the hum of generators as with old friends. He was an aberration here. They saw the sparks, the strange devices, the fierce intensity. They called it genius, madness, or both, but they never saw the current that drove it, the relentless humming need to translate, to make the invisible symphony audible to deaf ears. My greatest inventions, they were mere sparks thrown off, brief illuminations, while the true source, the vast interconnected dynamo of universal energy I felt, remained frustratingly out of reach, a melody forever on the verge of being heard. They called me solitary. They were wrong. Solitude was not my cage. It was my oasis, my necessary insulator. Imagine standing perpetually at the heart of a vast electrical storm, feeling every surge, every tremor in the global field, the birth pangs of a continent, the death rattle of a star a million light-years away. Human closeness, with its turbulent emotional currents, its unpredictable discharges of joy and sorrow, was overwhelming. A crowded room felt like being trapped inside a malfunctioning generator. The touch of another hand could send painful jolts through my nervous system. My retreat was not misanthropy. It was a desperate act of self-preservation, a grounding wire to prevent my own circuitry from overloading and burning out. I craved connection. Oh, desperately. But the pure, resonant connection of aligned forces, of shared understanding on a fundamental wavelength that seemed perpetually just beyond the horizon of human capability. I poured my longing into letters to my mother, ink blots staining the page like tears unshed, words straining to bridge the impossible gulf between the blazing complexity in my head and the simple, aching love in my heart. "The light I chase," I wrote once, the pen trembling, "is the light I saw reflected in your eyes before the world dimmed it. I seek to rekindle it, not just for me, but for everything." Did she understand? I think she understood the ache, if not the equations. And so, I became a custodian of the unseen, the grand towers of industry, the humming grids of power. They were crude approximations, clumsy fingers, fumbling towards the symphony. My true work, the work that consumed me in the quiet hours with only the pigeons for company, was the pursuit of resonance itself. Could energy flow freely through the earth itself? Could thoughts be transmitted not as clumsy words, but as pure vibrations, instantaneous and clear? Could the very fabric of space be tuned like a violin string? These were not mere engineering problems, they were spiritual quests, philosophical imperatives born from that first childhood spark. I saw the universe not as a collection of isolated objects, but as a single throbbing organism, every particle humming in relation to every other. My failures, they weren't the unrealized machines. They were the moments when the vision of this profound unity slipped from my grasp, leaving me stranded in a world that celebrated only the separate spark, not the unifying field. The accolades, the brief flares of fame, tasted like ash. They celebrated the magician's trick, not the underlying, breathtaking magic of existence I sought to reveal. It was in such an hour, the feeble electric bulb casting long, trembling shadows like spectral fingers across walls lined with the ghosts of unrealized marvels, the sheer weight of isolation pressed down, cold as mountain stone. My hand, usually precise in tracing the paths of unseen forces, trembled as it reached for the stark white paper. The pen felt alien, a clumsy instrument for the torrent of sorrow welling up from depths untouched by equations or ambition. Words, raw and unguarded, flowed not from the mind that wrestled with the universe, but from the heart of a sun lost in an endless winter. And there, in ink that seemed to stain the very soul of the page, the confession poured forth, directed towards the only true north my spirit ever recognized. My dear mother, I feel sad and dreary when I think of you. I don't know how, but I feel that you are not well. I wish I could be beside you now, Mother, to bring you a glass of water. All these years that I had spent in the service of mankind brought me nothing but insults and humiliation. The words lay heavy on the paper, an unsent monument to the unbridgeable chasm between the colossal currents I commanded and the simple, devastating human ache for a mother's presence, for the elemental solace of a glass of water offered in love. The letter remained, another fragment of static, crackling futilely on the vast, indifferent field of existence. Now, as the light within this vessel dims, flickering like a guttering candle in a vast, draughty hall, I perceive the final, profound resonance. The solitude they observed, the eccentricities they catalogued, they were not flaws, but the necessary conditions. To hear the universe sing its fundamental note, one must become utterly still. To translate its grand design, one must become a finely tuned instrument, susceptible to the faintest vibration, even if that susceptibility makes the clamor of the ordinary world unbearable. I was not a man who rejected the world. I was a man who felt it too intensely, who perceived its underlying unity too clearly to be satisfied with its fragmented, discordant surface. My life was a single, sustained effort to build a bridge between that hidden symphony and the deaf ears of mankind. A bridge made of lightning, perhaps, beautiful and terrifying, and ultimately ephemeral. It was never about the coils, the arcs, the humming dynamos. They were merely the alphabet I used, clumsy symbols scrawled on the void. It was always about the current, the invisible river flowing through all things, connecting the spark in the cat's fur to the silent grief in my mother's eyes, to the distant pulse of a star, to the quiet hum within your own chest as you listen now. I chased it, not for dominion, but for understanding. To prove we are not isolated points of light, but filaments in a single incandescent bulb, forever burning, forever connected in the vast, dark room of eternity. The light I sought, it wasn't mine to create. It was always there. I was merely trying to turn up the switch.